Hi, everybody. Happy third Friday. As Cassandra said, my name is Robin. I'm Robin Thompson. I'm the executive director of STAC, the Survive and Thrive Advocacy Center. We are a nonprofit here in Florida's Big Bend. That's the north part of Florida and the Panhandle. For all of those of you who are, looks like, joining us from both Florida and all over the country, welcome. We do work on behalf and with all people, all forms of human trafficking, anyone who is at risk of being trafficked, both sex and labor trafficking. That's a huge part of what we do. We do case management. Our advocate is Graciela Marquina. We do work only with many partners in our area and around the country, actually, sometimes. Because that's the only way I think any of us can do this anti-trafficking work. We do a lot of outreach, public education. We're doing especially a lot of work in reaching into our rural areas. We do lots and lots to promote community education and very often take our training specific to a particular agency or type of business or whatever anyone might need. So that's what we do. Part of what I would love for you to know about is to, if you haven't already, go to our website, surviveandthriveadvocacy.org. You'll see it is rich with information. Here's a few examples. So just so you know, and you might ask this, but we'll have both the PowerPoint and this program under our Education and Resources tab. You can see all of our past programs there as well. We also have several toolkits for community partners with lots of graphics and other information. More recently, we have something called a Youth and Caregiver Toolkit that we actually have worked with youths and parents and coaches and teachers, as well as survivors. Lived experience experts help us with all of this work. And we've had that help on those tools. We do posters. Those are available as well. And of course, all of our services and support for survivors are free of charge. That said, before you change the slide, Cassandra, well, that's okay. I want you to know that we're moving into our end of year fundraising campaign. The way we can do this work free of charge is that we get support from our communities. So wherever you are, we're asking if you have the ability and you enjoy any of our work, and you've enjoyed our work through this year, maybe prior years, that you would consider a donation. It's the way we can continue and really keep growing and keep maintaining these programs. So thank you for your support there. Next slide. One of the things that we do and have done this year, this is a new thing. If you like podcasts, I will confess, I love listening to podcasts. And one of the more exciting things I've done in my whole professional life is to be part of the creation of this one. In this podcast, we speak only with survivors of human trafficking about their experiences and what they want us to know. We need a small title when you do a podcast. You need something really small. I wanted this to say something like, what really only by survivors and what they want us to know about how we do better, how we respond as a community, and how we do the right thing. And with massive amounts of misinformation and misleading information, it is so important for us to hear from the survivors themselves. These are not podcasts where we go into, the details of someone's trauma. Quite the opposite is we have talked to survivors who have really moved through. There's still always, maybe issues that they are experiencing or have, but know that these are extremely interesting conversations. And I encourage you, if you have the time and the inclination to learn more and go deeper and hear from people who know best, please take advantage of the podcasts. All right, next one. Next slide. The other work that we do is as I mentioned, we are doing lots of work to reach out into our rural areas. A lot of people don't understand. They think that human trafficking, sex trafficking, labor trafficking happen only in big cities or in metropolitan areas. But in fact, rural areas are just as common to have instances of human trafficking, both sex and labor trafficking, both, U.S. citizens as well as foreign-born individuals. So one of the things we're doing is we're kicking off a program this January, which, as you all may know, is Human Trafficking Prevention Month. And we'll be having an event at an art gallery where we're going to be unveiling murals, artwork that are portable, that we're going to take throughout our 6-county area in the Big Bend. So those of you who are close by, we welcome you to join us and at any of those events in our surrounding counties. And if you want to know more, just stay tuned. And again, go on our website, sign up for our newsletter, and you'll see more information. All right, next slide, please. Okay, today we have an absolutely important, vital issue, and we are lucky to have the presenters that are with us today, Vanya and Daniela. Let me tell you a little bit about both of them. First of all, Vanya is officially, your title is Program Manager at the Center for the Advancement of Human Rights. And I'm only smiling because I've had the honor to work with Vanya now for over 20 years, maybe. And we have done this work. I call her, Vanya, you're more than a program manager. You're the glue that holds the center together, I'm sure. She is an expert advocate. Vanya has her master's degree from FSU. She's and working on another degree. She is BIA certified. And you know what, you'll talk about your BIA accreditation, if you will, Vanya, so that you all know that Vanya is highly accredited to be, she handles many immigration cases, both human trafficking and other forms of violence against immigrants in our world and our communities here. She has done tons of work over the years with numerous cases, and I know that she and Daniela are going to talk about this. She co-chairs with Daniela our Survivor Support Committee for the Big Bend Coalition Against Human Trafficking. Vanya is one of the best people I've ever known in my entire life, hands down, not just for the work that you do, Vanya, but for who you are. So I'm highly honored to have you presenting to us today. And we're very, very lucky that you're doing the work you're doing and we get to work together. Vanya is also a past board member of STAC, of the Survive and Thrive Advocacy Center, and a co-founder with those of us who brought our energies together almost 8 years ago. And let me tell you about Daniela. So Daniela Donoso, had the opportunity to know Daniela when you were an intern at the center, those many moons ago, and is now an attorney who was barred in Florida to practice law in April of 2021. Daniela is with the Legal Services of North Florida, which is our just a fabulous, wonderful support agency that STAC has worked with, and that we're, again, just so honored to be part of your village when we are doing this work, Daniela, and all that you do. Daniela has really brought energy and compassion and brilliance to our field of anti-human trafficking work in so many ways, both from those very, very beginning days. I remember, Danielle, we were packing up our materials to go to trainings together, to now through your representation of so many people. I want to read this part of your bio, and longer bios are on the website, you all probably saw, but Daniela is a past DACA recipient, knows what it is like to have your life shifted by fear and uncertainty because of the broken immigration system. Her personal and professional experience working with marginalized communities has instilled an altruistic spirit that makes her uniquely suited to, it's for this fellowship that you're on at LSNF, but I will tell you, but also to do this work. So Daniela, really, truly an honor to have your energy, your enthusiasm, and your expertise on our issues today. So with that, lots of hearts are popping up. This is one of the most loving sessions that I think we've started out with. Um, Also wanted to share with you as we transition now, this is the end of our slides. Thank you for all the love. As we transition to the slides that Daniela and Vanya will be using, just want to say a couple points of, um, of note. Half of the caseload that Stack has, about half, are people who are foreign-born victims of human trafficking. We've represented people who are both labor and sex trafficked, who are foreign-born, and who also have a lot of other, perhaps, I guess, intersecting vulnerabilities. Some have been survivors of domestic violence. Some have been survivors of child abuse. Some have been survivors of other crimes like fraud. And so know that this is an ongoing issue for all of us. And we're in a state that where this is extremely challenging to do this work. We are, of course, all in it together. So that's why today I'm grateful for all of you who are attending this program. Looks like we have 138 people here, everybody. We've got a Q&A as well as a chat function set up, of course, for this webinar. Really encourage you all to provide your questions and your comments and chat in the chat function there. I'll be monitoring it and sharing questions. If there are kind of foundational important questions that you need answered during the course of the presentation, of course, we'll be doing that, and other questions too, if they'll help share the information better. And also, we'll leave 10 minutes at the end of the program for Q&A. Okay, so that's it for me. Thank you, Vanya. Thank you, Daniela. So glad you're here, and I look forward to hearing all of your wisdom.
Thank you, Robin. And it is an honor to be working with amazing people like Robin, University of South Florida, that has been supporting this effort of having the third Friday trainings, discussing many topics. I've had the honor to work with Daniela and continue to work with Daniela, and we will continue to work in this field for the years to come. Really excited about that. With that said, the topic that we're going to be talking about today deals with immigration relief services for foreign victims of human trafficking. I am very passionate about this field. I have been working in this field, like Robin said, over 20 years. And you do hear sad stories. However, is the resiliency that you see in people, is what people accomplish, that really drives our day-to-day, and we like to see those success stories. The overview of the program for today is who are foreign victims of human trafficking, and the reason we want to cover a little bit more about that is to really erase those misconceptions that we have, that people come to the United States, quote unquote, what they say illegally. We try not to use that kind of terminology. We try to use undocumented. It's a better term. Who is illegal, right? That's just a term that it's not that appealing to use. So we are going to be covering more information about that. We're going to be covering services for foreign victims of human trafficking. Services for victims of trafficking in general are very challenging. And with the added component of someone having a foreign victim of human trafficking, maybe undocumented and even documented, it adds another layer of complexity and how to navigate with those, searching for those services. We're going to be talking about ways to find the proper services for them. We're going to be talking about immigration relief, which is an option if victims or survivors would like to explore that option. And also we'd like to talk about collaboration, because it really takes a village to do this kind of work. There is no single agency that can do this kind of work on its own. And that is why we like to establish partnerships, and we like to see, okay, who is on board from law enforcement, who is on board for legal services, for many, an array of different services. We, at the very end, we're going to have a question. We're going to leave time for questions. However, we encourage you that if you have a question that comes up as we are presenting, please feel free to ask. Our contact information is going to be shared at the very end. And of course, STAC also will have this contact information on their website. They always record every single training, so you'll have an opportunity to go back. Feel free to ask questions even after the fact. If Daniela and I can actually answer anything that wasn't covered during the training, or something that you thought of after the fact, please reach out. Daniela, next.
Awesome. Thank you, Vanya, for starting us off, and Robin for the such nice introductions. So we'll start with polling question number 1 to know who is in the audience. And I know many people have answered the chat, but if you can answer this polling question as well. Then we'll get a good understanding of who is in the room.
We'll end the poll in 5 more seconds.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, let's see the. Okay.
Okay.
All right, a lot of others. Okay.
Sure.
Great amount of case managers, 1 protective investigator, a couple of attorneys, NGO advocates. Doesn't look like any law enforcement, some community members, and then other. Great. And again, I know you guys have posted in the chat, so thank you for that. So as Vanya mentioned, we're going to first start with language. And so when we're talking about foreign victims of human trafficking, we're talking about those who may be documented or undocumented in the United States. So what does it mean to be living undocumented? So we hear a lot, there are people living in the shadows, people who are at risk of victimization by employers, by partners, because of their fear of law enforcement, their fear of deportation, right? It's also someone who is undocumented. It's a huge access issue, right? We know those without a lawful status in the United States typically don't have access to an ID, a social security number, work authorization. So think of anything that you have to put your social security number on to gain access to, like a credit card or even volunteering sometimes. But again, just as an overview, a huge access issue, especially for victims of crime. And yes, of course, there are documented and undocumented immigrants in Florida, right? We have a lot of agricultural tourism, reasons for family reunification. We know that many people who come to the United States, whether with a travel visa or without any sort of authorization, are fleeing violence, are in desperate situations. And yeah, there are many reasons for foreign-born victims to have been in Florida, either because of their victimization or after the fact. Okay, next polling question.
So we're going to start with the next polling question. Cassandra, if you don't mind giving us that second question. So have you or your agency ever worked with an undocumented individual? And see the word undocumented, not illegal. We'll give you a few more seconds to answer that question. And please feel free to share in the chat as well. If you've encountered any challenges, hopefully we can address those throughout the presentation. And it looks like 71% of you have worked with someone who is undocumented. It is very likely to happen with the number of caseworkers that we have. Wonderful. So thank you very much for sharing. So we're going to go into an overview of foreign victims of human trafficking. Continue, please, Daniela. When we talk about foreign victims, as Daniela had mentioned before, we have both victims of human trafficking who are documented and undocumented, who might be foreign nationals. So you might ask, okay, so how does that happen? Let's first cover undocumented. So who is an undocumented immigrant? You would think of an undocumented immigrant, someone, for example, that came to the United States maybe through the border, entered without inspection, but also you may think of someone who arrived initially with some form of status and the status expire and they have no more status. That would also be considered someone who has undocumented status. We also have victims of human trafficking who have arrived to the United States, for example, with different kinds of temporary workers visas. We have the H-2As, which are the agricultural workers who come here under a temporary basis. And this is due to the fact that there is such a huge need to have agricultural workers that we are actually not able to cover in the United States. We're not able to find those workers. And so many of the companies that need them need to rely on recruiting these workers from many other countries. And so they come here temporarily, many of whom have end up in really hard situations and in exploitation. In basically a traffic situation. We also have the H-2B workers, and those are any workers that are non-agriculture workers. So for example, I could tell you that they are people that work in restaurants, maybe in retail stores, in many other places, construction, anything that is non-agricultural related can actually come under the H-2B. And again, they are temporary workers. Many times companies exploit them to the point that they know one of the key factors that come tied to this H-2A and H-2B workers is that the visa that they get to come to work is tied specifically to that company that has applied through the Department of Labor to bring them over here. So it's if people are being exploited, if their documents are taken away, they are not able to really walk away because they can only work for this company. They can't really find employment somewhere else. As soon as they walk away from that company, they have no more status and they become undocumented. And so that is one of the areas that and gaps that employers kind of hold on to many times to exploit them and traffic them on a day-to-day basis. I'm not saying that every company does this, but there is a trend of companies that have done it over the years. We also have immigrants, as I mentioned before, that enter with tourist visas, and they overstay their visas. Once they overstay their visas, they become undocumented. Many times they are recruited. They are told, come with your tourist visa, and once you are here, we have connections to change your status. sometimes, yes, you are able to change their status, but most of the time it's very hard, and people end up being exploited in those kinds of situations as well. We've had those kinds of cases here in Tallahassee in which people have arrived with tourist visas, and the employer has told them that they are going to change their visas to workers' visas and eventually to lawful permanent status. Of course, that has not been the case, and they have found themselves being exploited. We have also found some cases, not as many, of immigrants with fiancé visas. These are visas that go through a process at a consular office, and in order to bring a fiancé here with a visa, the petitioner has to demonstrate that he or she has a true relationship with this person. Still, traffickers have been able to bring people here and exploit them. Just recently, we came across a case of a U.S. citizen who ended up bringing someone from Eastern Europe, brought her and didn't marry her, and the expectation was that she would do all the housework, that she would clean, that she didn't have any opportunities here, and there were lots of threats of deportation if she didn't comply with his request. So Daniela, if you'd like to read a case scenario so that we can walk through
Yeah, let's do that.
a case of trafficking.
Yes. So I'm going to read this case scenario, and then I'm going to ask Vanya a couple questions about it so we can figure out if this has been a victim of human trafficking. So if you want to read along with me, a recruiter came to Jean's house in Mexico, offering people temporary employment in agriculture for $12 an hour in the US. The recruiter told her that she needed to bring the deed to her house as collateral to make sure she complied with the work contract and also pay a $4,000 recruiting fee. Once she arrived in the US, her employer took her passport and visa. Jean and other workers were taken to a warehouse where there was no AC and they did not have enough to eat. They were only getting paid $10 a day. Jean's crew leader forced her to have sex with him. He told her that if she didn't, he would cancel her work contract and have her deported. There were guards with weapons at the entrance of the farm, so they were afraid to leave. And I'll just leave this up for another couple seconds. Okay, so Vanya.
Thank you, Daniela. And
is Jean a victim of human trafficking? And how do you know, yes or no?
Okay, so everyone feel free to also write your answers in the chat. Is Gina a victim of human trafficking? Well, let's see. She was recruited. She was promised a job in the United States paying $12 an hour. That was not the case. She had to pay a recruiting fee. Her passport was taken away. So she had no identity documents. She was coerced and forced into having sex with her crew leader, and there were threats of ending her contract and deportation. I would certainly consider Jean a victim of human trafficking.
Yes, and Vanya, the chat overwhelmingly agrees with you. We got a ton of yeses, so that's great. So we're on the same page. So let's go to the next question.
And let's add real quickly that someone noted too that the deed, having her home it's almost like hanging over her head too, that she could lose her property in her home country.
Yeah. By the way, we're not using real names, but this was actually a case that came to our door here at the center.
Yeah. So question 2, does Jean have any immigration status?
So Jean came here obviously with a visa, recruited, right? It doesn't necessarily say, I don't think, on our scenario, but she was recruited. So we're assuming that she came with the H-2A. Well, it does say that she had a visa. So yes, she came with an H-2A visa. However, just remember that I mentioned that that visa is tied to this particular employer only. So the moment Jean walks away, by the way, without a passport and without a visa now. And when she walks away, she loses that visa because she is not able to go to another company and get hired by another company.
Right. Okay. So what kind of services might Jean need?
And everyone in the audience, I'm going to ask you for your help. Please feel free to write in the chat. Absolutely. Well, how about medical? Let's start with medical. Maybe some kind of emotional support, probably mental health care. How about immigration? She has no passport and
Right.
visa. She needs that immigration. How about
Right.
a restraining order? She needs
Yeah.
to get away from this person, right? That has abused her, that has
Yeah.
assaulted her.
Yeah. And to add, Vanya, in the chat, we have housing, we have legal and trauma help,
Absolutely.
counseling, like you said, immigration advice, the police.
Yes.
Again, another medical as she's being raped, food assistance, civil legal representation. Again, like you said, medical health. Yeah.
All of you are experts. Thank you. Continued presence.
Right, we'll
Absolutely.
get there.
We'll talk about that. But yes,
Right.
absolutely. You're amazing. Amazing audience. Very knowledgeable already.
Yeah. So that last question, and some people in the chat have already touched on this. So what services are available in our area, Vanya, for someone like Jean?
So in our area, well, Daniela and I talked about legal services. Stack, for example, Stack does a lot of case management, but not only case management. In collaboration with the International Rescue Committee, they're able to provide many other services. They're able to connect to different service providers, such as medical staff, connect that we have a human trafficking task force from the law enforcement side that, by the way, only if our client is willing to accept these services we would talk to our client about, and only the services that our clients do accept. We're not going to coerce our client into getting services that they don't think they need. We really need to listen. Your client, this is client driven. This is, you have to do a victim center approach to make sure that the client agrees with everything, because you don't want to cause re-traumatization, right? You don't want to cause or increase that trauma that the client has already been through.
And we've seen, Vanya, some survivors want to go back to their home country.
Yes,
Not everyone wants to stay in the United States. Sometimes they're all alone here. They don't have any sort of support. So we can't just assume that just because they're here and they were victims of crime that they want to stay.
We really try to walk away from that I'm saving people's lives kind of approach, because that is not this. We really try to work with the clients and see what is it that they need and meet them where they are, not what we think where we think they should be.
Right. Great. And I think that, and we'll have another case scenario later on, but we're going to let Vanya continue on services for victims of human trafficking. And again, this is a very brief overview, right? We barely have 90 minutes to cover everything. So we're going to try to get to everything. We won't be able to go super in depth, but again, if anyone has questions, but just to keep in mind that it'll be a brief overview. So Vanya,
absolutely, please, let's go on, Daniela.
Yes.
Let's continue to the next slide. So we're specifically talking about foreign victims of human trafficking. And the reason that we'd like to focus so much on this is because it is just very challenging for someone who is from a different country. There is a language barrier many times. There are cultural issues as well. And just navigating the system on its own for anybody is very difficult. Adding to the trauma that they already have. We have two different sets of, you could say, services. We have services for pre-certified victims of human trafficking. So what does that mean? That means that before they work with law enforcement, for example, there is funding that certain organizations have. In our area, for example, the Trafficking Victims Assistance Program, more known as the TVAP program, the International Rescue Committee in our area, in our immediate area, that covers a big part of North Florida. They are the ones that handle this type of funding. So they do case management and they have many different referrals. But that type of funding can cover housing for a limited period of time. It's not indefinite. Employability services, mental health screenings, therapy, medical care, legal services. The website that you have at the bottom is a website that lists services in every single state and where you can actually go to look for more specifics in your area. This again are pre-certified victims of human trafficking that are eligible for these fundings for a period of time. Depending on the resources that each area has, it depends on how long people will get these types of services. We also have other fundings that cover certified victims of human trafficking. So what does that exactly mean? When victims of human trafficking have started collaborating with law enforcement, they may be eligible for different kinds of services. Law enforcement, this is the Department of Homeland Security Investigations, along with other law enforcement partners, can request continued presence for victims. What that provides is a way for victims to stay here during the investigation of a case. That provides them with the opportunity to apply for an employment authorization card, which can come also with, or will come also with, a Social Security card. That gives them a little bit of stability, because foreign victims of human trafficking normally come here to work. And with that, it gives them a very initial step to start rebuilding their lives. Certification letters, once they either get continued presence or they get T visas, which Daniela will cover more in depth, so I'm not going to take the time to explain what a T visa is, or a bona fide T application notice. Once adult victims of human trafficking receive one of these three, the caseworker, law enforcement, any service provider can actually request this certification letter through what is called the Shepherd program, through the Health and Human Services Department. And they can get this letter, and with this letter, they're able to access certain benefits, such as, let's continue to the next slide, Daniela, such as SNAP, TANF, medical insurance, Medicaid. They can receive services just like refugees would receive services. And so it's under that particular office. Anything that a refugee is eligible for, they can receive the services. Now, there is a catch that they are only eligible for this type of services, again, for a limited period of time. It's not indefinite. So once they get those certification letters, it is very important that service providers start seeking those services to make sure that they receive anything that they need. Again, that is only with client consent. I am not going to cover a lot. I wish that we had enough time so that I can walk you through the Shepherd system and enter a request and show you how to do that step by step. However, for sake of time, I would like to provide you with these different resources. There are guides to file these types of requests through Shepherd, through the Health and Human Services Department. So I like to leave you with these numbers. There is a live chat that you can also use through the National Human Trafficking Hotline. The Trafficking Victims Assistance Program is very, very useful, and they can also help with those certification letters if for some reason the clients come to the agencies without those.
Awesome.
Daniela, if we can continue.
Yes.
Okay, so Daniela, how about if I read this case scenario for you? This is Pedro. So Pedro's friend Harvey contacted him to ask if he wanted to start a company together in the United States. Harvey told Pedro to sell his business house in Chile and relocate to the US. He said he had connections to get Pedro a green card once he got to the US. Pedro believed him. Pedro and his family sold everything and came to the US. Harvey was making Pedro work long hours with very little pay and under hostile working conditions. Harvey threatened to get him deported if he did not comply. Pedro then realized that his friend's promises were not true and found himself stuck because he had no money and no passport to return to Chile. Harvey constantly threatened him with deportation and verbally abused him at work. 4 months later, after Pedro's arrival, he was able to escape from this situation. So what do you think, Daniela? Is Pedro a victim of human trafficking, and how do you know?
Yeah, so I would say yes, right? We have some coercion here. Pedro's coming under Harvey's false pretenses that there is a business that they're going to start together, but he lies to him and he's doing a different type of work than he was promised, and he's getting paid differently, and there's hostile working conditions. And a red flag is that Harvey took Pedro's passport away, right? We know that he has no money or passport to be able to return to Chile. And with the constant threat of deportation, it makes it difficult to, when someone doesn't know the laws here, right, that they have rights, it's a scary thought to have to be detained somewhere and deported. And so under that, again, the fear that he has and not having his passport and being threatened, where he doesn't feel like he can go somewhere else to work or ask for help until eventually he does. So I would say yes.
And the audience is agreeing with you. They're mentioning coercion. They're mentioning labor trafficking. They're saying yes, yes, yes. Very active audience. Thank you very much for your input. And so, Daniela, how does Pedro have any immigration status at this point?
Oh, wrong slide. So, yeah, it's not clear exactly how he came to the US, but again, I guess we can maybe assume that he came on some type of temporary visa. It might have been a travel visa, right, with his family, or a work visa. And Pedro was counting on Harvey to secure him the green card, him not knowing how it works. So I would think after those 4 months, he might not have any type of status.
Yeah, and just to add a little bit on that, everyone, and Daniela, is that let's say that he did come with a worker's visa, let's just say, but by leaving the employer, he wouldn't have any
Right.
status anymore. Let's
Right.
say maybe he came with a tourist visa. Well,
Mhm.
if he came with a tourist visa, the moment that he started working, he violated the
Right. Terms
visa
of, mhm,
conditions, the terms,
mhm.
and so he will not have any status. The moment
Right.
that it is found out that he started working with a tourist visa, whoop, that status is gone.
Right.
You know, one of the things that comes to mind, if I could just jump in for a sec, is when I make presentations, people think that people on visas, that's not how people are trafficked. That's not how they come into the United States, that they have visas. They think they're coming across the border. They think they're coming in through an illegal border crossing, to be more specific. And I saw a study the other day that said up to 40% of the people who are trafficked from other countries come into our airports, right?
Oh,
So they,
absolutely.
yeah, so that's another myth
Yeah.
that's out there. And I think just because of all of the wrong
Yeah.
information that's out there about immigration and how people enter our country and who, you know, what their situations are,
Yeah.
I think it's really important for people to know that.
Absolutely. And just to
Great
add a
point.
little bit more to that, Robin, it looks like Victor Williams just flagged something and he said, oh, students that come with visas. Well, if
Yeah.
they work outside the university, they have violated the terms of their visa. And so they could lose their status. So
Right.
you're right. There are so many conditions to visas that they can lose them in a heartbeat. Daniela, sorry. So what kinds of services might Pedro need? And please, audience participants, feel free to also type in the chat what you think.
Yeah. So very similar to Jean, right? Pedro's also going to need housing. He's going to need an immigration advocate to help apply for a T visa. I mean, it says family, so we don't know if there are children, if they're in school, medical help that they might need since they were working in hostile working conditions, definitely counseling from the trauma that they've been through. And in the chat,
Yeah, Jeanette says human rights advocacy. Absolutely, Jeanette. There are so many ways to help. And this is why we continue to mention it's an array of services. And so if the clients agree to have the services, absolutely everyone needs to be on board on this, right? That's why in a little bit we'll discuss how important collaboration is, but we are already mentioning that it is something that we should consider on a daily basis. And what services are available in your area for this particular client, Daniela?
yeah. So again, however they escaped to Tallahassee, you know, the first people that are contacted is probably Stack, right? So Stack, again, will be able to provide those counseling services, has worked on those certifications, knows exactly what types of benefits that this person would be eligible for, and then referring out again to organizations like legal services, like the Center for the Immigration Relief part, where maybe we can help with the work authorization. Maybe once everything is submitted, we can get a receipt notice so they can have a driver's license. And then how about work program? Yeah, so again, many services that we would need, and legal, mental health, the IRC, the
Law
Health and Human
enforcement too,
Services,
right?
yeah,
Continued
the
presence
cash,
as mhm,
right, working with the
absolutely.
Department of Homeland Security on that. So
Eligible for TVAP, the TVAP program? Yeah.
for TIVA, exactly, the cash assistance
Mm-hmm.
that they would be eligible for, need for the housing component, to pay rent, to pay for food. And yeah,
And
Robin, you can talk more about that.
yeah, we definitely would do that again with that whole idea that it takes a village. So we work with, you know, Second Harvest of the Big Bend. We work with faith communities. We work just with a whole, and even if you in your area don't have an organization like STAC or the IRC, then you can also look to some of these other organizations that do, you know, provide housing and support. So again, it's a matter of forming those partnerships really, and you can start very small. But you know, you're mighty when you partner with some of these people in your community that are already doing help or already doing services for people who need help, who might be vulnerable.
And
But
Robin, let me ask you in the chat,
Yeah.
we have a great question. Would resources differ based on labor versus sex trafficking?
yeah, you know, and I just was going to ask you that question too. So I'll start. You can finish. But yeah, everybody, you should know that in your area, you would have a rape crisis center. You would have a place where, if it's a minor, that you might need to connect with, you know, a child protection team. There might be other law enforcement involvement. Certainly, a call to your Department of Community, or sorry, Department of Children and Families. Because if depending on the person's status, now in this case, it doesn't talk about Pedro being having a disability or being a vulnerable adult, but say he was, then you've got another kind of vulnerability and a potential access and needed service with that disability. You might also need, depending on what's going on with somebody, access to, you know, you mentioned mental health, substance use disorders. There may be, who knows what's going on in somebody's life. We see a lot of prior victimization. If someone is being sex trafficked or has been sex trafficked, we see that there might be prior trauma, victimization. I encourage everybody to try to find, not only for yourselves to be trauma informed as you provide services, but make sure your partners have had some sort of training around trauma, and see who in your area does provide, you know, trauma therapy that are directly services that are directly for people who have suffered some kind of trauma. So I would say for sexual violence and sex trafficking, that you really do need to look at the services that are there now in your community for sexual assault. And a lot of what you said also applies, right? It doesn't, people still need housing, and they still need perhaps access to obviously an immigration attorney, other kinds of support.
I would also add that it is very important for organizations to make sure that they have the proper training. They're like STAC provides a third Friday training every month, making sure that the way that policies within our own organizations and agencies don't really interfere or so much impose certain rules and certain guidelines to for the victims, to the point that it's going to create more hardship for them. So making sure that we are providing those services, keeping in mind that people have been through very traumatic experiences.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And Victor's asking, do you see that question, Daniela? Were you just going to ask that?
Oh, I was going to ask, there's one in the Q&A.
Oh, okay. Okay, so it looks like we have a couple.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Go ahead. Let me step back, and then we can do Victor's, but doing the Q&A one is fine.
And we have, so last minute on this question, and then we'll keep moving through the presentation. But how would you know if an individual did come into the country with documentation, but is currently without documentation? And is there an agency to complete this verification through?
So it really is about partnership, right? You know that depending, you really need to explore those partnerships ahead of time before you get into this situation, because I can tell you that we've had really good agents with, like, for example, Homeland Security investigations, that I can trust that person is going to ask more than he needs or she needs to know in order to assist. Right. So working with them, working with an experienced immigration attorney within your area to find out, there are ways to request an entire file. It's called Freedom of Information Act request, that we complete for clients all the time to find out, because what clients sometimes call certain processes may not necessarily be what's in the system. And so many times we really need to depend on those, what we call FOIA requests, Freedom of Information Act requests, to find out, okay, what is it? What kind of status did they have?
Right. Yeah.
Or
It's a very
do they
brief
not have
overview.
at this point?
Right. Right.
Daniela, and I think that we're going to move on and then leave some time at the end. We
Right.
have a little bit more to cover.
Yes, yes. So I'll move on now to immigration relief and rights for survivors of human trafficking. And again, very brief overview, but for foreign victims of human trafficking, they may be eligible for many different types of immigration relief, including continued presence, which Vanya has mentioned before, working with HSI for continued presence. And that's when there is a ongoing investigation and the victim of human trafficking is helping with the investigation. And so HSI decides to give that person a work permit. It doesn't confer any type of lawful status. It's just while the investigation is ongoing that they can have, and that comes with different types of federal benefits as well. The T visa and the U visa are similar. However, the T visa is processing much faster. Both are for victims of crime, but the T visa specifically for foreign victims of human trafficking. A U visa is for a victim of a qualifying crime, and U visas, qualifying crimes, there's a long list. I think for Vanya and I both, most of what we see is unfortunately domestic violence, and if not, some kind of felonious battery. But with a T visa, once you apply, you receive, and there's a lot that goes into these applications, right? And that's why working with an immigration advocate is so important in these steps to make sure that all the information that is needed is sent. So unlike a T visa, U visa does require cooperation with law enforcement. So there must be some type of investigating agency. It could be the local sheriff's office. It could be a domestic violence injunction, a court. It could be a judge. It could be an agency like Department of Children and Families, right? Some kind of agency that is investigating the crime that occurred.
Yeah, Department of Labor, Daniela?
Department of Labor, right. And so for T visas, for trafficking visas, you can have a certification from an agency that has investigated the crime as well to help your case. And we often see a lot of affidavits from family members and people who know what happened. And again, once those applications are sent, they are affirmatively sent to USCIS, U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, another branch of Department of Homeland Security. And once they receive those cases, they send back receipt notices saying your case is processing. And again, depending on which type of status you're applying for, those receipt notices may be, you may be eligible already for your driver's license, right? And that's often the first step. And then it's waiting for, because there's such a backlog on these cases, now there are bona fide determinations made by USCIS officers where they determine that a case has most of the requirements. Doesn't mean you are approved, but they're going to defer action on your deportation and allow you to stay in the country lawfully. Doesn't confer a lawful status, doesn't lead to anything yet, but you are eligible for a work authorization. So we know that that's always a huge economic relief for clients to have access to a work authorization, to be able to propel their families forward, to have, again, that safety of being able to work and drive and not have to only rely on the limited resources that are available, right? There's still always a risk of deportation because they're not, again, conferring a lawful status, but and I'm going to show you a processing time in just a second, but to continue with to continue with the timeline, so let's say they have a bona fide determination letter, we apply for a work authorization, it still could take years before the T visa or U visa are actually adjudicated, right? So once
Daniela,
they are
how,
adjudicated,
just
then we can, oh, I'm sorry.
yeah, just to give them a more concrete example, Daniela, for T visas, let's start with the U visas, since those are the ones that are taking longer.
Yeah.
The applications that were submitted in what year are you getting those bona fide determinations for?
Most recently from 2017. So
Same.
we're in 2023. So yeah,
Mhm.
it's taking a long time for those letters. And so
Mhm.
these are clients that have been victims of crime in the US and have been waiting 4 or 5+ years to even have a work permit. And yeah, so once the cases are adjudicated, then they continuously live in the United States for a certain amount of years, again, depending on your status. If you have a T visa and there's no longer an investigation, you can actually request a letter saying that the case is closed and that they are allowed to apply for early adjustment, which is a case that we've had before. So then you can apply for legal residency or your green card, and then eventually citizenship, right? So I'm going to show you guys this real quick since we're on T visas. So this is from this morning today on the USCIS website. You can check processing times for a lot of different types of applications. So for the application for a T non-immigrant status, and I know it's kind of blurry, but this is the I-914 application for T non-immigrant status, benefits to non-citizens victims of trafficking, sent to the Vermont Service Center. 80% of cases are completed within 17 months. So almost 2 years, right? Year and a half for the T non-immigrant status to be adjudicated. And again, they could be eligible for a work permit before this time. But that's just an example. And U visas would be, what do you think, Vanya? Like 65 months.
Yeah, they're taking a very long time. I think that I just had one approved that I submitted in 2017, and that was the full U visa approval at the beginning of 2017 is when I submitted it. But for the rest of them, I'm only getting the BFT for the meantime.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if there are children, right, we know that a special immigrant visa could be available depending on, again, their background and different various immigration components to what is required for that type of visa. And let me see if I put another processing time. Okay, I don't think I did. So again, very, and I can put it in the chat, the website, but just go to the uscis.org website, and you can see on the homepage a link to check processing times just to get an idea. And again, this is just to show, even for immigration relief, this is even after they've, escaped from the trafficking, have had to connect with a service provider that will eventually refer them to an immigration advocate, and they have to go through an intake. They have to go through various appointments to know what their status is. Maybe we have to request a FOIA that like Vanya mentioned, and that can take months sometimes to really have a good picture and idea, depending on how long they've been in the country. Do we need a translation service? Luckily, Vanya and I both speak Spanish, and I would say majority of our cases here are Spanish speakers, but we have had clients that do speak other languages. And so that's another just component to think about in the timeline of how difficult it can be for services of foreign-born victims to receive. And then they have to gather some evidence, and then we have to submit the application, and then wait weeks for a biometrics appointment, for their fingerprint appointment. They have to travel to Jacksonville for that, until they finally have a receipt to go to make an appointment at the DMV, and maybe they need an advocate with them for that. So there are many steps, and we're just, again, giving a brief overview. But
Can I jump in on
Yes.
just
Yeah,
one
yeah.
of the questions? One of the questions from Connie is, how are individuals supposed to live while they're waiting for the work permit? So many, adversities wait, against them. And how do you assist while people are waiting? And I thought I could just say that we've supported legal service. Well, when you all were doing legal representation for a mutual client, what you do to provide services is part of what you do is you help people with their other needs. You might be able to get them housing. You might be able to get somebody some other kinds of support, some health care, some mental health care. You might be working with, excuse me, just in general. And to be honest, I think sometimes people will work under the table. They will still, they need to support themselves and their families. So we see that might happen. And that's just a fact of life when you see these long periods of time. But would love to get your additional thoughts on that if you have time. But the other thing I want to tell everybody, and you might be getting this as you listen to these experts talk about this, that if you have a client who is a foreign victim of human trafficking and they need legal representation, please make sure you find somebody who understands human trafficking issues and immigration law, because there are so many, first of all, immigration law in general is a highly specialized area of the law. And then specialization within that is human trafficking, because we have seen, immigration lawyers who are great immigration lawyers for other things, but they don't know about this issue. And your clients could end up paying them exorbitant amounts of money, making them promises that are unrealistic, that have no concept of all of this, just because they think they can handle it because they do other kinds of immigration work. So just really be wary of practitioners out there. And then there are others who represent that they are knowledgeable about this field in general, and they're not. And we've seen clients who have spent literally thousands and thousands of dollars, and it is money that's gone down the drain because someone really hoodwinked them, right?
And we
Yeah.
have seen those that have good intentions, but good intention is really not enough. As Robin said, immigration law is a total different area, and there are so many factors that you need to consider. Definitely follow up. Daniela, before we move on, I think we touched just briefly on family reunification, but I don't know that we touch enough so that people know what that means.
Yes. So it is just another benefit of having some sort of immigration status, right? Is family reunification. So sometimes people, in both of our scenarios, I believe both Jean and Pedro came with their families, or maybe Jean did not.
Jean did not.
Jean did not. So maybe Jean, in a scenario with Jean, she wants to, maybe she is married, maybe she has children that are in Mexico. And so often we see clients who come in order to send money back to their families for a better life, right? And so having the opportunity to apply for family members to come immigrate to the US to be with them is another huge benefit in the streamline of immigration relief.
And I can tell you that that moment of family reunification is amazing. I have been with several clients when they have reunited with their kids, with their spouses, and it's such an amazing and touching feeling.
Yeah, definitely worth everything that
every single piece of paperwork,
every single detail and process and work that it takes to put into what that is, to see. Yeah, like you said, Vanya, just even when they have their work permit, right? It's just a huge sigh of relief after everything that someone has been through to get to this country, to have been a victim with their trauma, to finally have a sense of relief and a sense of opportunity and just thankfulness that they can work and provide for their families, just like all of us want to do.
Absolutely.
Okay, I'll move on before I start crying. Let's okay, and really quickly, since we only have 20 minutes left, victim rights, again, regardless of immigration status, and this is straight from the Florida Victims' Rights article 116, due process, on applying for a protection order, right? For victim compensation, they can apply to the state attorney's office for that. The right to report the crime. Sometimes we have clients who call, maybe not necessarily trafficking victims, but that didn't know that they could call the police, or that in this, climate that they're terrified of calling the police. So having advocates to help in that process as well. Other rights available upon request, conferring with a prosecutor, providing a victim impact statement. And I think someone had mentioned in the chat as in terms of what types of services someone would need was someone accompanying them to court. And I think that was a great point. And that talks to a lot of this, because some people don't know what their rights are, right? And at legal services, we make sure to, even if we can't accept a case for whatever reason, or just in general, to give victim rights brochures and information, and make sure that people know what their rights are in the country, regardless of their status. Okay.
So why is it important to know how our organizations can help foreign victims of human trafficking? Well, as we have already covered, foreign nationals have very specific vulnerabilities, and it's very much tied to their immigration status many times. That immigration status which traffickers exploit day in and day out, that there is a lot of fear, that there is fear of law enforcement. We have to consider all the cultural aspects of helping people, and truly understand why they are afraid to go certain places, why they are afraid to reach out to law enforcement. Knowing the capacity of our organizations, but also the assistance that they are actually in this if they are victims of human trafficking, I would even say entitled to, because the government, after the Trafficking Victims Protection Act was signed, has adjusted it and has added new provisions to make sure that we do assist victims of human trafficking. And so this comes from federal law. This is that grants are provided to different parts of every state,
Mm-hmm.
is so that there are benefits and services out there that people can qualify for. We just need to know where to go, how to seek for those services. Again, Daniela and I will be more than happy to brainstorm if in your area you haven't encountered those kinds of services. We're here to help. There are task forces and coalitions all throughout the state of Florida. Every region has one, just like the one we have here, the Big Bend Coalition Against Human Trafficking. There are task forces all around the state. As a matter of fact, the center has been sponsoring meetings. We had our second annual meeting with task forces and coalitions and discussing how else we can help. And thank you, Daniela, for bringing up the last poll question that we have. Can we start that poll, please? So what is the biggest barrier your agency faces when serving foreign victims of human trafficking? Please feel free to tell us in the chat. Is it the language barriers? Is it the funding limitations? Is it the lack of training, information for service process? Are there other kinds of barriers that your agency is facing? Let's allow maybe for like 5 more seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's close it for sake of time. All right, so yes, absolutely. I would say funding limitations, lack of training. There are trainings. Please, STAC provides these trainings. They're free to the community. Encourage people to take them. There are different trainings throughout the state. Please encourage people to also attend those trainings. There is a human trafficking symposium every year that is put together by the Attorney General's office. There are other online trainings. STAC has recorded every single one of their trainings that they've done for years. That podcast that STAC is coordinating with survivors, they provide a wealth of knowledge because they are really experts talking about their experiences and letting us know. Okay, let's see if we can close this. So a lot of what we face is lack of institutional memory. That is why training and awareness is so important. And this has to be constant, because there are people that come in and leave the agencies and organizations, and it is important that everyone continues that training. It is always important to continue to grow. There's no way that I know everything about human trafficking, even after being in the field for about 20 years. I learn new things all the time. I like to continue to do my professional development in the area. Immigration, for example, is such a huge area, and we collaborate with different people. Make sure that you have those points of contacts too, that you are able to brainstorm before you get a difficult situation that you need to navigate. A lack of access to updated information, absolutely. But again, if you build a network of people in the field, just get connected. There is information out there. Lack of internal policies and procedures, those need to be established even before you come to the first human trafficking case. This is conversations that organizations and agencies should have. I know that we'll be happy to discuss more with your agency if you like to do that. Robin is amazing when it comes to policies and procedures. She's a trooper in that area for many years. Robin, it's really an honor to have learned so much from you. Language barriers, I mean, we have different partners, different organizations have people who speak different languages. There are colleges and universities that have language capacity. There are different hotlines that maybe you can access for or language lines. Collaboration, everyone. Collaboration is really key. There is no, again, one single agency that really can do everything. We have to do this as a community. Communication is key. Those memorandums of understanding, if you can establish those at the very beginning, just to see who compromises to do what, who is going to be responsible for different aspects of service provision is very important. I can't really stress enough collaboration. It is important that we do everything victim-centered and when you do the intakes, when you do the screenings, just make sure that you're listening to the victim, because it's what the victim needs at that moment, and those needs may change over time, is not what you think is best.
True. Thank you, Vania. And just again, to reiterate, having a multidisciplinary team provides the best service. And just as an example, legal services, the Center for Advancement of Human Rights, STAC, and the International Rescue Committee, we had a meeting at the center. I mean, we're in communication constantly, but we were in the same room together to talk through a couple of cases and just what are the gaps right now? What's actually needed? What can we do? What do we refer? And it was, you know, us sitting down and having a conversation. And sometimes it's hey, bring your lunch and let's just work through it. But that's what we did. Really. Yeah, it's constant phone calls. I know I can call Vania for anything, and Robin too, and just say, hey, what's going on with this? Or how can we help? Who do we talk to? Who do we trust? Right? Who's in the room? And so for us, it might be a monthly or every other month meeting like that, sitting down, the four of us, you know, organizations together to talk through currently what we're looking at, what we're seeing, because we can talk always big picture and you know, and trainings and things, but when it comes down to the nitty gritty, right, work of what it takes. And last slide on resources. Again, Survive and Thrive has a lot of what, if you need trainings, if you need referrals, if you need policy updates, whatever it is, check on STAC's website for a variety of local, state, and national resources. And then I will leave it now open to last minute questions.
One last thing, Daniela.
Review the CLE. Oh, yes.
One last thing.
Yeah.
Daniela is very modest and didn't tell you, but she's going to be part of a new organization here in the Tallahassee area that will assist a big area of the Panhandle, even a bigger area than the center is assisting, because they will reach out to Georgia, Alabama as well. The focus is on accompanied minors. But Daniela, you're coming on board soon, and you bring those expertise in T's and U's. And so we're very, very blessed that we're going to be sharing more of the work that is coming our way. Education is really targeting prevention. So let's continue this. And now I will be quiet and open it to questions.
And
thank you. Thank you both so much. Clap, 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 little hands up here. So much information, and you did a fantastic job of, I think, both informing us so we know what's what, as well as helping us understand that there's a whole heck of a lot more out there that that we need to learn. These are important issues. So we've gotten a question about, with the changes in Florida law, could we be charged with transporting undocumented persons? I think there's a question internally within the state of Florida and across state lines. I think there's a legal distinction. Do either of you want to talk about that?
We've had those kinds of conversations, and it's really crossing state lines, right? Daniela, would you like to talk a little bit more about it? I know that you've been connecting with different groups about that.
Yeah, there are various challenges to all of these new laws from this particularly anti-immigrant legislative session. It was very difficult. We know that all of us probably felt the ripples of what that looked like and the fear in our communities. But yeah, like Vanya mentioned, there is, and Robin, the distinction between when you're inside Florida borders and then when you're actually crossing. But again, many things are being challenged. I don't know if that piece of legislation was also part of the stay, but yeah, and it's always been a risk to drive without a license, right? It's always been a risk to work without a work permit, and that hasn't changed, but the consequences are changing. And so I think that's what is instilling more fear, but there is a lot of misinformation. And I would follow the Florida Immigrant Coalition for updated information. They're a great advocacy org in Florida, and they've worked constantly on the legislative issues.
Yeah. They really work on the ground and have a big advocacy component.
And you know, the other part about it is the Florida Immigrant Coalition, and then Shagufta shared a resource earlier on the chat from American University that I'd like to also reshare, which is the National Immigrant Women's Advocacy Project. There are some national organizations too that are very good. So we've got Florida specific advocacy. Let me share this one again at WCL, the Washington College of Law. I know that ASISTA, ASISTA is also, a lot of these organizations that are out there are in general there to assist immigrants, as well as not just trafficking. It could be domestic violence, could be other, say, violence against women issues. So know that there are some other organizations. Are there others that you've worked with? Because I know we have people from Houston on this call. I mean, on this webinar.
And CAST provides those technical assistance calls that you can schedule individually with an advocate or an attorney. You can participate in, I think they have a weekly service provider call, and they have also a weekly legal service provider call.
Yeah, and that's castla.org. I'll put that in the chat.
Yeah,
And we do
thank you,
have a
Robin.
question: how can I become involved with assisting with human trafficking or anti-trafficking in relation to employment? I live in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I'm not sure who I would contact.
So there is a whole resource, a national, what is it called, Robin? It's the hotline puts it together, right? This resource guide, in which I know Stack is listed on it for different areas of the United States, and so every state has different service providers listed. Is
for
that
the hotline, right?
for the hotline? Mhm.
Yes, yes. Yeah, I put the hotline, also the information there as well, because the National Human Trafficking Hotline, it vets some of, people. And if you go on the hotline, there's a kind of an interactive map, even you put your state in, and then your area, and you can see where there are local service providers. And it might be, like a local domestic violence shelter also does some form, like a partial representation of some trafficking victims, maybe only sex trafficking, but you do get an idea for service providers in your area.
Mhm.
Any other
And-
questions?
Yeah, somebody was asking about records. If documents are lost, and say you're representing somebody and some documents are lost, I kind of jotted down some of
Yeah.
the questions from earlier. What do
So
you
I
do?
can
I mean,
I
maybe
can tell you that we do a lot of that.
yeah. Okay.
Many of our clients come to us without actual documents and without every document that they need. And so we want to see what the government has that is able to provide us, many times to explore immigration relief, but many times because we need those documents to submit the applications. And so we complete a Freedom of Information Act request, and you can complete this Freedom of Information Act request with different types of agencies. The agency that you think has, or many times multiple agencies you can submit it to see what agency has the information that you actually need. I know that for immigration cases, we submit this request to Border Patrol, we submit it to USCIS, we submit it to multiple agencies under Department of Homeland Security or the EOR system to make sure that we have the documents that we need many times, because our clients come without the documentation.
Right.
And I think the question too is, and it might be, maybe it was a question or not, but if someone does have any immigration documentation, like say they do have a letter or they do have, the certification, they should have multiple copies of that, right? Always keep it on them. And if they lose it, then there's another one available. So there's kind of prevention work you can do around once you get here and you have your documents too, to encourage people to always have them with them.
Absolutely. I know that for one of my clients, the way we found out the company that hired him, that brought him here, is he took a picture before his passport was taken. This was very, very smart of him. Took a picture of that page and sent it to his wife back in his home country. And then when we started doing the screening and everything, wait, he said, I think my wife still has the picture of the visa. Let me ask. And sure enough, that is the information after he agreed to share this information with Homeland Security investigations. That is the picture that really gave HSI the information that they needed to investigate that company.
Nice, good tip. So Daniela is I'm sorry, you're sharing, and I'm putting it in the chat too. This is the information to get your 2-hour CLE credit. And also Florida bar is not really reciprocal with a lot of other bars around the country in terms of CLE, but what we have found is if you want to get credit for this and say you're a lawyer or paralegal in another state, just be in contact with Stack. We'll give you the PowerPoint. We're going to, by the way, post this PowerPoint and the video up on that web address that I gave you earlier. But no, often you've got the chance to get credit still with backup usually, and we can help you do that. We want to make sure you get your credit.
Great.
All
Thank
right.
you everyone again for joining.
Yeah. Thank you. Here's our contact information. Please follow up with us if you other questions come up or a situation comes up and we can help. We'll be happy to brainstorm with you.
Great. And you can see here, somebody's asking how to do referrals. You see both Vanya and Daniela's information there. We put ours in. I'm Robin at surviveandthriveadvocacy.org. I put that in earlier. Just loved this presentation today. Thank you, Vanya. Thank you, Daniela. This is hard work. And I really want to say to you both, you do a tremendous amount of work for so many people in our world. And we really appreciate it. And you go above and beyond all the time. So thank you. And I think everybody today, just the fact that we got like 5 people saying, how do I make a referral to you, is evidence that, you know, we need to clone you. But I know that there are wonderful people throughout the state. One of the things that we all do and have to do is we connect outside of our areas all the time, around the country and around the state. Vanya didn't get a chance to talk about it, but the Human Rights Center at Florida State has a full network of contacts as well. So that's also an option for you to reach out to her. Know that human trafficking hotline online is a great resource for you too. And also, just as a final point, you know, we talked a lot about labor trafficking and sex trafficking, but I always want to tell people this at the end, because labor and sex trafficking can happen with the same person. Sometimes we think it's one or the other, but these victimizations intersect all the time. So know that knowing about both labor and sex trafficking is vital. So with that, let me say thank you. We're 2 minutes over. So let me tell you that even though we always say we do third Fridays every month, we're not doing it in December because of the holiday season. But we will be back in January for our third Friday presentation. And now in January, we're going to have another great presentation from Marina Anderson, and she's going to be talking about human trafficking in adults with disabilities. Y'all, it'd be great to hear from you, and for you to also connect with us and let us know what you're doing around the country and the state in January for our big awareness and prevention month. So we want to all work together. We'll put your stuff on our calendar for sure. I put national stuff up there. We get it up there all the time because there's fantastic stuff and very informative work being done nationally. If you've got something going on, please share that with us so we can get it on the calendar. And thank you, Graciela. I know you're here. She posted my email again. I thank you for that. And once again, y'all are getting lots of thank yous and kudos, and we are grateful to you. And this year, this is the second year I think we've done this presentation, and we're going to see about booking Daniela and Vanya to do another immigration presentation for 2024. So stay tuned for that. Get on our newsletter and you'll know exactly what's going on and when.